Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Winnetka Village Council study session for August 9th, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask everybody out there in the audience as well as up here in the dais to mute your cell phone or other electronic devices. And I'll ask the village clerk to do a roll call for attendance.
Thank you. Trustee Apatow?
Here.
Trustee Kripe?
Here.
Trustee Handler?
Here.
Trustee Dearborn? Here. Trustee Swerk?
Here.
Trustee Dahlman?
Here.
President Rins.
Here. Okay. So tonight is what we here in Winnetka call a study session. It's different from our regular council meetings in that we don't deliberate or vote or do any such thing like that. And this is kind of a special evening because we're actually calling this a listening session for the village council. We use these meetings to usually discuss a broad variety of topics in an open conversation forum. We always love to have the public participate in these conversations. And it's the place where we start to get our head wrapped around things that could potentially move us to policy or legislative decisions. This is not a public hearing like we have for zoning applications where we're required to have a formal due process procedures. Tonight, the council is providing the community an important opportunity to express in open session opinions and views on the important issues of firearms use and safety. We will begin with presentations tonight from our village attorney and our chief of police, Mark Hornstein. And just to set the stage, you know, what brought us here this evening, or what created this idea to have this meeting, obviously was the horrible events that happened on July 4th up in Highland Park. You know, and I've talked to many residents since that time. And, you know, there's a lot of thought on this process. There's a lot of thought on this subject. There's been a lot of Starbucks and hometown coffee conversations and things of that nature. And I thought it would be helpful to bring it all home here to council chambers and allow our trustees to sit back, open their minds, and hear what people have to say on it. I'm not sure whether something will come out of this or nothing will come out of this. But we want to be able to, when we do finally sit down and have our discussions, which, you know, may be in September, October, depending on temperature and what we hear this evening, that, you know, we will have a broader knowledge base to have these conversations on. Now, I'm pretty sure that just about everybody in this room, including, you know, us here at the dais, have formed our own opinions on this subject in one way, shape, or form. So I'm asking my colleagues tonight to just, you know, open your mind and hear what folks have to say. And we may learn something, we may learn nothing. You know, we're struggling with what we can do that really makes a difference. One of my clear missions since I took this seat was to make sure that the work we do at Village Council has efficacy, that we don't waste time doing things that don't lead anywhere or don't help us get to somewhere where we're hoping to go. So, you know, I guess I'm trying to dial down expectations for any future action, but I do want to hear and I know all of us up here really want to hear what's going on. I know the conversation has been advanced on a state and a national level in a lot of cases. We're not here to solve the problems of the United States of America or the state of Illinois. We're really here to address the issues that come to us as residents of the village of Winnetka. You know, the one thing that has really struck me about the events in Highland Park, and this is what I keep hearing from people, you know, we've had a big turnover in population here in Winnetka over the last 3-4 years. A lot of young folks move into town. And the number one thing that I hear from all of them is the reason why they moved here, a lot of times from the city, was because of the feeling of safety and security folks have when they move to our community. And a lot of them feel that's been disrupted, taken away from them. They don't know what's real and what's not real anymore, and what they should be concerned about and what they shouldn't be concerned about. And that strikes me that you know, as a village council, we owe it to our constituency to think of ways that we can help restore a sense of safety and security here in our community. And so from that standpoint, that's what we're hoping to hear from you folks is you know, what are the ideas? What are the positions? You know, we really don't need a lecture on the Second Amendment here this evening. I think we're all fairly understanding of the document and all have our own interpretations of it. But what we really want to hear about is what we might be able to do here in this town to restore that sense of safety and security that makes Winnetka the special place that it really is. So with that said, I would like to turn it over first to our village attorney, Peter Friedman, and what he'd like to outline is fundamentally what's going on from a legislative basis, give us a historical background of what's been going on in Winnetka, and then that'll be followed by Chief Hornstein, who's going to talk a lot more about gun safety and safe storage and things of those natures, and other things that the police department might be able to help provide that security blanket that we're all looking for this summer. So, Peter, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you said, I thought it would be helpful if I provided just a brief summary of what's in the village code now with regard to firearms regulations, and then also a little bit of the state of the law, because there has been, needless to say, a lot going on with regard to the Second Amendment and challenges to these types of regulations, so I thought that would also inform the discussion a little bit. You know, the village has a distinct and unique history of acting on firearms legislation in response to actual gun violence and in response to court decisions that have ruled on firearms regulations under the Second Amendment of the Constitution. This back and forth is directly reflected in the current village code provisions on firearms. Those provisions are all in one place. They're in Chapter 9.12 of the Village Municipal Code. And with regard to the discharge of firearms and minors, there's a general prohibition on the firing or discharging of firearms in the village. The exceptions to that are basically under circumstances where there's police supervision. There is also a prohibition in the village code on providing a firearm or firearm ammunition to any minor in the village. With regard to assault weapons, the village has a fairly straightforward, standard, safe storage and transportation regulations that were adopted in 2013, and the 2013 adoption is relevant, as I'll discuss in a little bit. Under these regulations, it is prohibited to carry or possess assault weapons in the village unless on your own property or in your own home or in your own place of business or on someone else's property, home, or business if you are with that person's permission. There are exceptions to that allow transportation of assault weapons. Those exceptions are limited to when an assault weapon is broken down in a non-functioning state, when the assault weapon is not immediately accessible, or when it is unloaded and enclosed in something like a firearm carrying case or box by someone with a valid FOID card. Further, it is not a violation in our code to use an assault weapon in a lawful act of self-defense or in defense of another. The village code also has a rather unique provision and program that allows for the voluntary surrender of handguns and ammunition. That surrender is directly to the chief of police. It is without identification and without possession prosecution to incentivize the turning in of unneeded or unusable guns. The handguns and ammunition that are turned in pursuant to the program are destroyed unless they are needed for an ongoing investigation. Firearm dealers are prohibited in the village under our code, and if there are any pawnbrokers, they are prohibited from dealing in guns in any way or displaying or pledging them or purchasing them. So that's our village code. With that as the regulatory backdrop, let me just briefly review the state of play with regard to the legal case law and statutes on firearms rules and regulations, as determined by both our courts in Illinois and, of course, the U.S. Supreme Court. With regard to the regulation of handguns, in 2008, there was a very important Supreme Court decision, 5-4 decision. The case was called, everybody refers to it as Heller. It was Columbia versus Heller. In that case, the court for the first time interpreted the Second Amendment to the Constitution to protect the right of law-abiding citizens to possess a handgun in their home for self-defense. Now, at the time of the Heller decision, the village of Winnetka had on the books a 20-year-old prohibition on the possession of handguns in the village. That prohibition, of course, had been adopted by the village shortly after the tragic shooting at the Hubbard Woods Elementary School in 1998. Almost immediately following the Heller decision, the National Rifle Association and 3 village residents filed a lawsuit challenging the village's ban on handguns. And in the face of that litigation, and in light of the Heller decision, the village board voted unanimously in November 2008 to repeal that handgun prohibition, but to maintain the other firearm regulations that are currently in the village code. Subsequently, in 2010, another case, this emanating based on Chicago's handgun regulations, was heard by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court held there that the Second Amendment was incorporated under the 14th Amendment, which is a legal way of saying that the Second Amendment not only prohibits places like the District of Columbia, which is a federal enclave, but also prohibits states and municipalities from infringing on individuals' Second Amendment rights. With regard to concealed carry rules, this past July, we have the most recent Supreme Court decision, which was the New York Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, who was the superintendent of the New York State Police. That case, the court extended the Heller decision and ruled for the first time that the Second Amendment also protects and extends beyond the home to protect an individual's right to carry a concealed handgun for self-defense in public. Now, there's 2 very significant things about this decision that I want to focus on. First, the decision really didn't have any impact in Illinois. Our concealed carry legislation is known as a shall issue, quote unquote, shall issue regulation. The New York regulation is known as a special need or a may issue regulation. In other words, in New York, under their rules, somebody who wanted to carry a concealed weapon outside the home for self-defense had to file an application and show a special need or something outside of a normal self-defense justification, and that could be denied if the government official didn't think it met the standards. That's called a may issue. The court disagreed with those regulations and said that they violated the Second Amendment. The court, and specifically the concurrences to the opinion, specifically said that the type of regulations in Illinois and 42 other states on concealed carry were not impacted because we have objective standards, and once those objective standards are issued, the government official, in this case the Illinois State Police, must or shall issue the concealed carry permit. So in that regard, the practical effect of the Bruin decision was not significant in Illinois in that limited regard. However, the second, perhaps more significant impact of that decision was that the court established a new test to analyze Second Amendment challenges to firearms regulation. And this new test places the burden on the government to demonstrate that the challenged regulation is consistent with the historical tradition of firearm regulations in this country. Put another way, unless the state or municipality implementing a firearm regulation that directly impacts the right to bear arms can demonstrate that the regulation is consistent with the nation's historical precedent of firearms regulation in existence at the time of the adoption of the Second Amendment, the regulation, based on the court's analysis, would most likely be found unconstitutional. This test applies not just to the concealed carry type of regulations that the court was considering in that July decision, but to any challenge to any firearm regulation under the Second Amendment. So with regard to the regulation of assault weapons, the law in under the Illinois statutes and federal courts is frankly unsettled. On the one hand, in Heller, that original case that found the right to self-defense, the court there and every Supreme Court decision since, including this one in July, found that just like other constitutional rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not, as the court said, a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose. And so Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Kavanaugh specifically wrote a separate opinion that said that lots of regulations can still survive Second Amendment scrutiny. Licensing regulations, and they gave some examples. These are just examples. Licensing regulations, prohibitions on the possession by felons, concealed carry in sensitive places like this village hall and government places and schools, conditions and qualifications for the commercial sale of weapons, and prohibitions on carrying of dangerous and unusual weapons. Admittedly, what is dangerous and unusual is left undefined. Now, numerous states and municipalities and the federal government itself for a number of years, as we all know, have enacted and enforced bans on assault weapons. However, in Illinois, municipal authority to adopt assault weapons ban is limited by state statute. And that's because, and now we're going back to this 2013 date, that's because in 2013, when the state was becoming the last state in the country to permit concealed carry, there was an amendment to that statute as part of that statute, and that amendment declared that the possession or ownership of assault weapons is an exclusive, within the exclusive jurisdiction of the state, and thus preempts home rule ability to regulate the possession or ownership of assault weapons. However, there was a carve-out to that preemption, and the carve-out was that any regulation that was in existence at the time that statute was amended, or adopted within 10 days of when that statute was amended, those regulations were not preempted. And it said that an ordinance enacted on or before or within that 10-day period could be later amended. So, put this all together. In Illinois, there are generally two ways to challenge or that assault weapons bans are subject to challenge. Either they are challenged under the Second Amendment or based on the state's preemption of home rule authority. And how this has all been subsequently analyzed by the courts matters for this council and this community, because the village did, within that 10-day period in 2013, adopt its current firearms safe storage and transportation provisions. And accordingly, the village should not be preempted from taking further legislative action if it desires to do so. On the preemption issue specifically, we have the Deerfield case study. Village of Deerfield in 2013 adopted a very simple registration requirement, somewhat less of a regulation than Winnetka's safe storage and transportation regulation. They did that within the 10-day window. Then in 2018, the Village of Deerfield amended that registration requirement into a full-blown assault weapons ban provision. That was immediately challenged, but significantly that challenge to the Deerfield Code was not based on the Second Amendment. It was based on an interpretation of state statute. The Illinois Appellate Court agreed with the Village of Deerfield and upheld the assault weapons ban under a challenge based on the state statute. But in an odd circumstance, after this case was appealed to the Illinois Supreme Court, one justice recused himself from that ruling. which left 6 justices of the Illinois Supreme Court to decide the case, and these 6 justices deadlocked at 3-3. And so the appellate court decision, under the rules of appeal, if in order to overturn an appellate court decision, you need a majority. The fact that it was 3-3 means that the appellate court decision held. And so the Deerfield assault weapons ban remains in place. But we don't have a clear indication on what the result would have been or may be in the future if all 7 justices of the Illinois Supreme Court were to rule on the same issue, and particularly since the makeup of the Illinois Supreme Court is constantly changing. And we don't know whether it will matter that the village's regulations were more robust in 2013 than the village of Deerfield's. On the Second Amendment issue, the city of Highland Park, also to avoid preemption, adopted a full-blown assault weapons ban in 2013. Now, Cook County has had an assault weapons ban that it's amended over time, but the county has had one since 1994. Highland Park's ban was upheld by the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago, and that case was also appealed directly to the Supreme Court from the Seventh Circuit. Now, the Supreme Court denied that appeal, not on substance, but denied to hear it. It's called denying cert, which means that it did not take the case, which means that the Seventh Circuit's decision upholding the constitutionality of Highland Park's assault weapons ban stands to this day. But, of course, that Seventh Circuit decision was, and all these decisions, were prior to July's Bruin decision by the Supreme Court and the new test. And Justice Thomas, in a kind of an odd move, wrote a separate opinion dissenting from the court's decision not to hear the Highland Park appeal. And his decision said, or he said in that decision, that he thought the Seventh Circuit had gotten it wrong and that Highland Park's assault weapons ban was a violation of the Second Amendment. And of course, Justice Thomas was the author of last month's Bruin decision. So not surprisingly, since the Bruin decision last July, numerous cases have been filed in various places around the country challenging a number of firearms regulations, including state and municipal assault weapons bans. We simply have to watch carefully how those cases proceed and are decided. So I will now turn it over to the chief, but I'm happy to answer any questions when appropriate.
We'll open it up. Excuse me, there's no questions from the audience. I'm sorry, it doesn't work that way here. You can wait until we open up the microphone for public comment, okay? Thank you. Thank you for your service. But that's okay. Let's wait until it's time. Okay, thank you. Questions for Peter?
Peter, any insight as to what the state of Illinois is planning to do?
There is legislation since Highland Park.
Yeah.
But I don't know politically whether some people in the audience may have a better sense than I do.
Yeah,
But I
suspect.
don't know whether there's enough votes to pass anything. I just don't know.
And are you hearing, and again, we may get this from the audience, about municipalities sort of working together, given the anticipated litigation costs of any action?
There has been an effort. I know the mayor of Highland Park has been very active, and others. I think that there is a recognition that if something is to be done, it's most effective if there's a critical mass.
Right.
So there is that effort. I don't know specifically about joint defense or
Yeah.
grouping like that. It just depends. It also depends on the litigation that would unfold. Oh, sorry. No.
Well, thank you for the
Yep.
summary. That was really helpful.
Others? Anybody have questions for Peter?
No, thanks.
Not yet. Maybe later.
You have a question?
Maybe later.
Okay. Secondly, we'll turn to Chief Mark Hornstein, who's going to give us a rundown on his perspective of firearm safety issues.
Thank you, President. Thank you, President Rins. So good evening. I have a handful of topics I'd like to This audio sounding good here, sorry. Get right up to the mic. A handful of topics I'd like to touch on, but to start, I don't want to assume that everybody has an understanding of what the Foid Act is, and just so everybody is on the same page, when I reference it, I just want to do a very brief overview of exactly what it is, so there's a clear understanding when I make that reference. Illinois specifically has what's called the Firearms Owner's Identification Card Act, and this provision was first enacted in 1968. It's been enhanced several times. The Foid Act requires that any Illinois resident wishing to possess or own a firearm or ammunition must first apply for and receive a Foid card. Application is made to the Illinois State Police. The Illinois State Police then conduct a background check, and they either issue or deny a Foid card to a resident. The background checks will include criminal history, checks for violations of domestic violence, order protections, and mental health history through the Illinois Department of Public Health. The Foid card is revocable under Just stop on me.
It's all the time you get, Chief.
We have a new sound system coming soon, but not soon enough.
Or you want, or come here.
Maybe if I hold it like this, I'll try this. Okay. The Foid card is revocable under several conditions. Just to name a few, because by my count, I think I had 38, but just to name a few, these include felony indictments, respondent of an order of protection, voluntary or involuntary committal for mental health treatment, or other conditions that demonstrate a clear and present danger to society. The screening for mental health committal and orders of protection are conducted daily against the Foid database. When a match is determined, the Foid is revoked, and a letter is sent to the Foid card holder and the chief of police of the appropriate jurisdiction. So that's just a brief overview on what the Foid Act is. Now, just to take you on a little bit of a ride along with us here with the police department, there are occasions where we are called to situations and we encounter a person who, in the assessment of the officers on scene, may believe that that person is presenting themselves as a clear and present danger, either a danger to themselves or a danger to others. So appropriate action will be taken at that time, which may or may not include a voluntary or involuntary committal for a mental health evaluation. If that occurs, what I want to mention is one very significant tool referred to as a red flag that law enforcement takes. And that's the completion of a clear and present danger form that's we fill out by the state police. I'll also add that school administrators have the authority to complete one of these forms as well. That form is completed and sent into the Illinois State Police with a summary of the incident. The Illinois State Police receives said document, and the burden is on them to review the incident and make a determination as to whether or not the circumstances call for revocation of the person's Foid card. Prior to July 18th of this year, the administrative code with the state dictated that when the Illinois State Police would get a clear and present danger form, they would conduct their assessment, and if there was a determination that it didn't qualify, that record was destroyed. On July 18th, the governor issued an emergency order, which is in effect for 150 days, and that requires that the Illinois State Police maintain that document so that while somebody may not possess a Foid card today, if they apply for one in the days ahead and a clear and present danger document was filed, they'll be able to reference back to that and subsequently make a more informed decision as far as whether or not somebody should have a Foid card revoked, or even if they're applying for a Foid card, for that matter. So our understanding is there will be public hearings with the hope of potentially amending the Illinois Administrative Code rulemaking process to perhaps make this a more permanent stay versus 150 days, which is currently the order. So that's one tool that we do on a consistent basis, is the filing of a clear and present danger act. Another tool, more recent, 2019, is a firearms restraining order. Again, this is where typically if can be law enforcement, but if a family member, household member is concerned that somebody's presenting as a clear and present danger and they have access to a firearm, they can file in the county circuit court where the person resides a firearms restraining order. And one thing that's significant to note with this is it has to be a verified complaint. It has to be firsthand knowledge. It can't be a rumor. It can't be speculation. It has to be a verified complaint that's presented in front of a judge. So those are the two specific tools that we have available right now when it comes to red flags. Going back to what I had said a few minutes ago about sort of taking you on a ride along, and when we encounter someone trying to get the services that they need, whether it's a voluntary, involuntary committal, once we do that, and whether we file a clear and present danger form or not, the next step in the process on our end is we employ a social worker. And our social worker is assigned to follow up on this particular case. The social worker will be in communication, direct communication with the family, will offer short-term services, and will also provide referrals for long-term services to the family as well. So Winneck has actually had a social worker dating back to the early 80s. We were one of the first departments to actually have a police social worker. So we're very proud of that. Circling back to the Foid card. There are occasions when we receive notification that a resident's Foid card has been revoked. While we have no statutory requirement to act on that, because the authority is state police, once we receive notification of that, we act immediately, without delay. We've done that consistently every time we've ever received one of those, and we'll continue to do just that. To that end, with that process, if we obtain firearms from somebody whose Foid card has been revoked, we will temporarily store those firearms for that individual until another resolution can be determined as to ultimately where those firearms would go, whether they would be destroyed or turned over to a lawful Foid card holder. A few other things that we do, the police department, to help promote gun safety. One, and we offer gun destruction, and we have for years, decades. Anybody at any time can turn in an unwanted firearm if they so choose. We partner with the Northeastern Illinois Crime Lab, and the crime lab has the guns melted down at a destruction event that they do is witnessed, and we have documents of the destructions. Another thing that we are in the process of currently doing now is partnering with Project Child Safe. I've actually placed an order for gun locks that once we receive them, we're going to advertise that to the community, and anybody would be welcome to come and pick up a free gun safety kit for promoting the safe storage of a firearm. So that's kind of a summary of what we do when we're responding to a situation where we have a person that's presenting themselves as danger to others, and some of the steps that we do to help promote gun safety within the community.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate that. So at this point, does anybody have questions for Mark?
I had a question for Mark. On this mental health issue, if it's a confirmed case and they're denied a Foid card or it's revoked, is that in perpetuity, or is that, can they get it back? Can it be restored at some point if there is a confirmed mental health issue?
It's a fair question. I'm not aware of a case where it's been reinstituted,
Yeah.
but to say that it's never happened, I don't have that information.
Okay. I was just curious in cases that we have recently come to light where there were incidents before and there were supposed red flags put out. And is there cooperation between how often do the local police say red flag it and the state police say no?
How often do they say no, did you say?
So they overturn it. If it goes, if you give a local concern to some type of person in our community, and you said it goes to the Illinois State Police,
Yeah.
Could they or would they overturn your recommendation?
It's solely up to them. It's their authority. We don't have any authority to make a determination on whether the person's going to be revoked, denied. It's
Wow.
entirely their authority.
Okay.
Others?
You mentioned the governor's emergency order extending the retention of the records. Are there any other practical issues like that that are getting in the way of meaningful tracking of what the hell's going on with screwballs out there?
I think this will go, if this could be permanent, this will go a long way because, you know, if we honestly, in our assessment, if we believe that somebody's presenting as a danger, we're going to err on the side of reporting that.
Yeah.
And we would rather let the Illinois State Police do a thorough review and make that determination. So I think if this can become permanent, where a clear and present danger form is retained indefinitely, I think that would be very helpful. It would go a long way in potentially preventing somebody who has no business owning a firearm.
Are there records that we can maintain outside of the FOIA process? So say the state of Illinois, for whatever reason, you know, frankly, the evidentiary standards are difficult, right? You know, it's sort of like it is for conviction of a crime, and that's a high standard. And I can conceive when you apply that evidentiary standard that there's going to be a lot of situations where, you know, the state is going to say, you know, you can keep your guns. And if our system is entirely dependent on that process, I'm worried that we're not going to have robust intelligence. And is there some process outside of FOIA that allows us to, frankly, keep tabs on people that we know have guns and shouldn't?
Well, you know, we have a records management system, so if we have incidents that we respond to, we will do everything we can to document who was involved in the incident, what the substantive nature of the incident was, and if it's something where maybe this particular response, it didn't rise to the threshold of clear and present danger.
Yeah.
But over a period of time, sometimes patterns can develop.
Yeah.
And if you have an emerging pattern, and now perhaps you get to that 10th contact, that no, this does qualify for clear and present danger, there's nothing to prevent us as a law enforcement agency from sharing that historical information that hopefully can do a better job of informing the Illinois State Police of the seriousness of this, while the other half dozen, however many contacts, didn't meet that threshold. We're trying to paint a picture. We're trying to give a totality of it. Well, okay, now this happened, but understand, even though before it didn't reach that threshold, there's a pattern here. And so to your point, I mean, through our records management system, yes, we can provide
And then
context.
one last question. You know, it's very clear that the vast majority of these cases involve young men, teenagers, young adults. They may not have a long history to establish a pattern of troubling behavior. Sometimes, you know, they seem to, you know, a couple of years ago they're like little kids, and then all of a sudden they're doing terrible things. And what can you? And I know you've got a good sense of this, given your career. Can you give us a sense of how the school district and the police department work together?
Yeah. So we're actually really proud of that partnership. We We have reciprocal reporting agreements with our public schools. We've had one with New Trier for a number of years. We refreshed it a few years back. And then I believe it was in 2019, we did our first ever one with District 36. So having that process in place goes a long way in opening up the lines of communication between the schools and us. You know, as a result of that, you know, you have threat assessment teams that are formed, free-flowing communication of understanding a holistic picture of the needs or potential threat of the young person. So yes, that partnership, I think, has gone a long way. It does go a long way and continues to go a long way in keeping everybody on the same page, because, you know, we understand that some of the challenges that the school will deal with during the school day may be some of the same people that we have challenges with on a weekend. Right? So having those agreements in place allows us to, I don't want to say have someone on our radar, but allows us to be more informed as to what's going on and what the needs may be or things that need to be addressed with that individual.
Thank you.
Can I just have one follow-up on what Andy just said? Is that line of communication with the schools a direct line of communication? It doesn't go through the parents. It goes directly from you to the school?
Yeah, it's
Sometimes parents won't.
Myself or my designee, or, you know, superintendent's designee. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Kim, did you have anything? Okay. How about over here?
Chief, just kind of a basic question here in terms of what you know as the police department. Are FOIA card holders, do you know the holders of cards in Winnetka? Do you know the residents?
No.
You do not?
No.
You don't have access to that?
Well, we have access to a lead system so that if we had a reason to want to check, if we were responding to a call and we were trying to determine if weapons could be involved, we could run a check to determine if somebody has a Foid card, yes, but it's not like there's a running log of that.
Okay, and if you made that check, would you know the weapons that that person had purchased, had
No.
registered? You
No.
would not know that. So when you go to someone's home, you don't really know what's in that home?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no registry.
John, anything?
No, just
Gina?
listening well.
Yeah, Chief, thanks for giving us a good overview of that. One of the things I think we all struggle with is the information gap, right, between what the state police has and what local police have. And is there anything, you know, maybe it's the North Shore Police Chiefs or it's a greater municipal league of police chiefs, is there some discussion or is there any kind of, I guess, discussion going on you have, the local police chiefs have the best read on people, right, oftentimes. And the information, you know, we've had this information on clear and present danger. It got would get destroyed, it may get changed. We have this historical database in our records. But is there any further discussions? I'm worried about the gap, right, of the records that have been destroyed and they haven't been retained, and also just some sort of discussion on how we can have better referral of information back to the local police departments who have a better sense of folks, right? And, you know, how they can work better, and it's not just going to the state police. You know, is there any discussion on that?
Well, I mean, a couple things is, and before I answer that, I do want to circle back to one thing I just thought of with Trustee Dearborn's question is, one thing we do have, Trustee Dearborn, is if somebody applies for a CCL, concealed carry license, we do get notified of that. And if we have local contacts with that person that is of a concerning nature, we do have the ability to file an objection. So that we do get notice of. So just thought of that. Trustee Dahlman, circling over to you with that. Information gap. Well, when a Foid card's when the Illinois State Police revoke the Foid card, they communicate with us and we act. You're right about, I'd like to think that we, local police, do have sort of the boots on the ground, most informative intelligence information, because we're the ones dealing with that person. To that point, as far as the communication, we actually have a very robust communication network of local law enforcement. So while maybe the information that we have, if it doesn't reach the threshold of clear and present danger, isn't going back to the state police, it is being shared regionally. So if we have someone that we're concerned about who has acted in a way that we think has the potential to escalate and become dangerous, we will share that information with surrounding law enforcement communities and vice versa. A really good network sharing of that. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah, I think it does. I just am concerned that, it's great if we can get this emergency order codified in legislation, but there's still this gap of information, and, I think that's, you answer my question though, but that's a policy issue.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up.
Sure.
If you get notice of a FOIL card rejected, you go to a residence, wherever, to get the arms back, how do you know how many to get back if you don't know what they have?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you have to provide them, you have to provide the Foid card recipient whose Foid card is being revoked with an affidavit. And they have to complete an affidavit indicating what firearms they have. And you're right, there's no registry, we don't know. But it's an affidavit, and we serve it, collect the Foid card, any weapons that they have, take possession of them, safely store them until they're disposed at a later time.
So there was no tracking of gun serial numbers or anything on the FOIL card?
No.
That's
No.
something that,
No.
not sure how possible that could ever be, but, if
No,
I'm
there's
the
no
bad guy-
registry.
If I'm the bad guy, yeah, here's my 3 guns, and I've got 2 more. So that's interesting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any others? Okay. We'll go ahead and, before we start with public comment, just a few ground rules. I had one question. A lot of familiar faces, but some unfamiliar faces, and I knew that this conversation would bring out a lot of different people. I'm just curious if I could just see a show of hands for all those folks that actually are Winnetka residents. Awesome. So we're going to have a really good conversation tonight. Thank you. Please, when you come to the podium, try to help us understand your position. It's very easy to tell people what you think, but we'd also like to understand, and I think it would help us get a greater understanding to understand why you think that way. If you have a position, give us some reasons why you've taken that position, and help us understand, because those are the sort of things that are going through our minds right now. I know everybody has some people have canned messages that they'd like to provide. Other people are very passionate and emotional about this. Yes, sir. I would just like Okay, well, hold on. Just let me finish the ground rules, and I will actually ask you to come to the podium first this evening. Okay? Please don't. That's the whole point. That's the other thing I was getting to. I'll give you the hook, okay? Okay. We have there's something buried in the village code about a 3-minute restriction on time at the podium. I'm not going to ask people, although I will be keeping time, and if it sounds like you're going long or you're, and I know when you get up at this podium, look at me, I just babble and ramble all the time up here, right? So, and I know it's nervous standing up there, and we try to be empathetic about that, but at the same time, there's a lot of people in this room, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to share their opinions. So if you can keep it responsibly concise, that would really be appreciated, and hopefully we'll be able to get through everybody and learn something along the way. So I'll stay good with my promise, and why don't we let our... our anxious guest up to the microphone. Hold on, wait till you get to the microphone, because nobody can hear you.
Done a terrific job with the stoplight
Name, please?
program here in Winnetka. And
Can I have your
repaving.
name?
My name is Peter Gelderman, Gelderman. I'm 86 years old. I live at my family home at 896 Tower Road, Winnetka. I was in the 50s. I graduated from Holy Cross College in Worcester, Massachusetts, well before Associate Justice Clarence Thomas, who graduated from Holy Cross. So in 1960, I was separated from the United States Army, peacetime Army, when President Eisenhower was the president.
How about tonight?
Pardon me?
What do you have to say about what we're talking about?
Well, what I have to say is the AK-47 is was made in 1943 by Russian citizens in the face of an invading Nazi army in Russia. And it's a deadly weapon, and it has no place outside of a U.S. Army bases. It should not be in the hands of any civilian, U.S. civilian under the Foid program. Foid program is a good program, but it should not include, the Foid program should not include the AK-47, either for civilians or police personnel. I'm sorry to say, Chief, you can have all the pistols and long guns that you need, but not the AK-47 that only belongs on U.S. Army bases, not in civilian army. So somebody better write their state legislature and tell them no AK-47. We did have a armed Winnetka policeman on the roof of the building across from 714 to 721 Elm on July 4th. And that's thanks to Chief Ornstein and his on the ball Winnetka Police Department. There was no such Highland Park policeman in Lake County on the roof of the Misero building. Only the demented young man who will be standing trial in the near foreseeable future in Lake County, Waukegan, Illinois.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
All right.
Elderman. I appreciate your comments.
All I wanted to say, thank you, and thank you, you good people.
All right, now we will start on the first row, and we will work our way left to right from where you're sitting. Just a second, please. Left to right, right? Isn't that free? Would you? No, what I'd like everybody to do, I'm sorry, thank you. You'll find I stumble a lot up here. When you come to the podium, please enter your name onto the sheet. I'm sorry, we don't usually do sign-ups for speaking, and I noticed a lot of you folks did. No, that's okay, but we don't usually do that. So we'll start over here at this corner, and we'll work our way across. Would you like to speak? Now you may speak, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Karen Rosen Edelman. I have quite a past with the village, past trustee, past president of the PTA, League of Women Voters, secretary of the caucus. I was there with the murder of Nikki Corwin. It was during my term. So I'm here to ask you to relook at your code for assault weapons. Don't be waiting to see what the other villages do. Take a leadership role. I also want to tell you anecdotally about a Foid card. I have one. In June, I was sent a letter that my Foid card was going to be expiring in October, and for $11 and filling out a form, I could renew my Foid card. I did it online. It was a questionnaire. I could have answered the questions in any way I choose. Are you mentally sound? Have you done anything? Have you had any civic problems? You know, went on and on. I could have checked off any box. All I wanted was a current picture and $11. And within less than a week, I received a new Foid card. Something's wrong. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. You folks are going to be real tired if you're going to keep clapping for everybody who speaks, so come on up.
Thank you so much for doing this tonight. I'm not a resident of Winnetka, I'm a resident of Highland Park, so thank you for letting me be here tonight. My name is Stephanie Jacobs. I was at the parade in Highland Park on July 4th, as I've been every single year. I grew up in Highland Park as well. I was far too close to the shooting, but of course, I'm one of the very lucky ones. I wasn't physically injured. I'm here tonight. I'm not going to talk about handguns, and I'm not going to talk about the Second Amendment, even though I'm a lawyer. I'm not going to talk about politics, because I don't think this is a political issue. It's a public safety issue and a public well-being issue. I'm going to talk about living freely and the freedom to be at a park or at a concert or at a parade without the fear that someone somewhere has an assault weapon, a weapon of war, and at any minute they could indiscriminately spray bullets into the crowd. There's no reason whatsoever that a civilian ever needs an assault weapon. These are dangerous and unusual weapons. They're used in war, and their purpose in war is to cause as much death and destruction as quickly as possible. I was in Washington, D.C. 3 weeks ago at the Senate Judiciary Committee hearings. Dr. Kayleen Hunter, who's a former military combat veteran, testified that weapons of war and the bullets they shoot liquefy organs. They go through Kevlar helmets, which are the helmets worn by the U.S. military. Why does a civilian ever need a weapon like this? What happened in Highland Park could have happened here. It could have happened anywhere, because in this country, it's happening everywhere. I'm going to give you guys a few more statistics that I'm sure a lot of you know. A mass shooting is defined as a shooting in which 4 or more people are killed or injured. In 2021, there were 691 mass shootings. Over 45,000 people were killed by gun violence last year. Since the tragic mass shooting in Highland Park 4 weeks ago, there have been 92 mass shootings. It's a real statistic, 92. And the Highland Park shooting was only one of 14 mass shootings that happened in the United States that weekend. The holiday weekend of July 4th, when we're supposed to be celebrating our country and the freedom that we have as Americans to live a life of liberty and happiness. And it's not just about the people who die in these shootings. It's about the people who are there, who experience it. I have friends whose kids were there, and my kids' friends were there, and they ran for their lives. Some of them hid in stores for hours. How do you explain that to a kid? And then there are the people who were injured. There's a woman, I got a text today from a woman who's been in the hospital since July 4th. She's moving to rehab soon. She's not going to be able to put weight on her foot for over a year. And she's one of the lucky ones. There's an 8-year-old boy who will never be able to run with his twin brother because he was shot at the 4th of July parade. How do I explain this to my 8-year-old twin boys? We need an assault weapons ban, and we need it here in Winnetka. We need it across the North Shore. We need it in Illinois, and we need it in this whole country. So many other countries have done this. They've ameliorated the problem of mass shootings. I ask you tonight to please stand up, to please do something so that we can all be safe. You have it in your power to start this and to do this, so please think about what I'm saying And please do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your families and your regular schedules. I know how much people are really busy these days. So my name is Catherine Hurley. I am a resident of the village of Wilmette. I graduated New Trier High School in 1998. I have two future Trevians that are only 6 and 9 years old at my home. And I'm committed to doing whatever we can to help address this gun violent crisis, which I completely agree is a public health crisis. So really, my first interaction with gun violence was on May 20th, 1988. I was in 2nd grade, as many other people who were born in the 80s were, and Lori Dan walked into a 2nd grade school and shot people. And later, when I was in high school, my same classmates, because I was in 2nd grade, were then in high school. And I interacted with them, and at that time, you know, in our community, we didn't have as much gun violence as we have today. And those few survivors, every so often on the anniversary of the Lori Dan shooting, they would get interviewed and they'd be asked their opinion about are we doing enough? And every year they would say, we're not doing enough, right? So here we are fast forwarding. Gun violence now seems to be so prevalent that it's something that I have to talk to the kids about. I was not at the Highland Park parade, but I could have been. My family wasn't there, but we could have been. I was getting text messages asking from my friends at work who know that I live up here, were you at this parade? People being worried. I was touched that they were worried, but then I was sad and scared at the same time. You're gonna hear a lot of really great ideas and a lot of statistics, but I think my main message tonight is one of the most important things we need to do is talk about this issue. It's so great that you're here tonight. I really think that this should just be the beginning of the conversation, because the more we talk about this and socialize this is not an issue that's just in Chicago or just somewhere else. This is in the North Shore, and people are moving up here because it's safer. We want it to be safe, but it's actually just safer. It's not really that these issues aren't happening. So you're gonna hear a lot of great issues and great ideas, and definitely some of the ones that most resonate with me. Safe gun storage. If you have a gun and it's a lawfully held gun, then let's lock it up, because kids and teens and people in crisis can get access to someone's gun that's not locked up. I was explaining to my kids why you should keep a gun and ammunition separate, because someone could be playing around and not realize that it's loaded, and someone can die, right? And that's completely lawful, not will intent, but accidents can happen, and accidents happen all the time with guns that are totally lawfully owned and are not weapons of war. We also are very lucky in Illinois to have great or improving gun laws, including the Firearms Restraining Order and red flag laws, but they don't work if you don't know about them. So we have to talk about them. We have to have farmers market tents. We have to talk about them at the high school. And we have to talk about them to younger kids, because if a kid sees a gun at someone's house and doesn't know that that's not safe, that's not a toy, then that can become an accidental death right there. So we have to normalize and talk about this issue. If we don't talk about it, it's not gonna go away. It's only gonna get worse. So in summary, I thank you for the time. I thank you for holding this conversation. It's really, really important that we keep talking and figuring out what's right for this community and on our community. And I really hope that when my rising Trevians get to New Trier in a few years, that there'll be more conversation about these topics and that they are more informed, and we're not scared of telling them, but we're telling them so they can be informed and help make the right decisions. They can call a police or a teacher or a parent if they see a friend talking about guns or talking about shooting people. So many of these incidents, these larger ones, there were red flags, right? And some of our processes fell down. So we have to, you see something, you say something, and you keep saying something until you get to someone who's willing to do something. So thank you for being here tonight, and I'm really optimistic this is just the beginning of the conversation and much more action we can take together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Lauren Harper. I'm a 12-year resident of Winnetka, and I'm actually one of the leads for Moms Demand Action. There's a bunch of us here in the audience. I actually think we might be the largest organization on the North Shore right now. We actually have 2,440 members that are residents of Winnetka, Wilmette, Kenilworth, Northfield, and Glencoe. And these are active members that are showing up to meetings and doing things. For those of you who might be unfamiliar with our group, we're a grassroots organization that advocates for sensible gun policy. But more importantly, we actually work at the local level within our communities to keep people safe. So recently, as she was saying, we've actually been working a lot on the issue of safe gun storage. So you might be asking why this issue in particular. Just put yourself in the alternate universe where tonight Congress manages to pass every single law regarding preventing gun violence that we can think of on the table right now. The problem is that tomorrow morning, we still wake up in the very same exact world that we live in tonight. The same world that allowed for Lori Dan to walk into Crow Island in Winnetka in 1988, followed by countless other shootings. And again now, Highland Park, right here in our backyard. And why is this? Because we still will have 350 million at minimum guns in our closets and in our bedside tables and in our communities. And so in this reality that we actually live in, we just need to acknowledge that 44% of adults right now live in homes with guns in America, and 54% of them don't lock them up. In Illinois, just in 2021, our state accounted for 24% of all gun sales in the entire United States, but we only make up 4% of the population. So the landscape here is changing quite a bit, and we just need to respond accordingly. I believe that the lowest hanging fruit that we can pick off as a community is locking up our guns. So as Chris was saying, we have all of these like federal and state laws that we're trying to pass and that may pass and may not pass and may get overturned. But this idea of locking up guns, it's just like the most basic component of a social contract that we share with our neighbors to keep each other safe. And it's also likely the one that has the biggest potential impact to keep our community safe. So bottom line is if you own a gun, lock it up. Incidentally, I believe that this is what every member of our police department does at night. So it's certainly what all of us should be doing if we own firearms. And I think it's important to note that I am just acknowledging freely that I believe a lot of us do own firearms. So that's what the data says. So we can't afford to ignore it because the public health crisis that we all call gun violence right now is the leading cause of death for children in the United States of America, and that's not acceptable. And that brings me to our kids. The landscape has also changed for our youth quite a bit. For whatever reason, COVID, social media, phones, you name it, our kids are suffering from an unprecedented mental health crisis. Teen suicide is up 53% in the last 10 years, and it continues to get worse. Among 10 to 14-year-olds, the suicide rate has increased a staggering 146% in the last decade. We hear from our school administrators and our teachers that despite an abundance of mental health resources that we have right here in our towns, our kids are not doing well. I know this to be true. I have 3 teenage daughters, all of whom have friends who are struggling, and that's putting it mildly. The CDC now says that even before the pandemic, in 2019, there was a huge study that said that 1 in 5 teens contemplate suicide, 1 in 6 teens have made a plan to commit suicide, 1 in 11 have made an attempt, and 1 in 40 have required hospitalization as a result of an attempt of suicide. Now, I mention this because we know that teen suicide is impulsive, and that we know that the method matters. So some of you may suggest that people who have suicidal thoughts will just find a different method. But the data is actually really clear here. Suicide that does not involve a gun is less than 4% fatal. Suicide that does involve a gun is more than 90% fatal. So what that means is that if a family member or a friend uses a method other than a gun, the overwhelming evidence shows that in the wake of a suicide attempt, you will have the opportunity to attend therapy with them, not a funeral for them. So again, the social contract we have as parents requires that we lock our guns up safely. We have to do that to keep our kids and their friends safe. But unfortunately, we know that the habit of leaving guns poorly hidden is very ingrained and that our community needs to be frequently reminded of what safe gun storage looks like and why it saves lives. We've heard it tonight. They need to be locked in a safe, unloaded, separate from ammunition. And this message is most effectively delivered from multiple respected and relevant sources. So our schools, our pediatricians and healthcare providers, our village and town leadership, our police department, they all need to communicate in concert and wrap around this problem. And the great news is that that ball has started rolling recently, which is amazing, so thank you. In addition, we also believe that there's an opportunity for our village to increase awareness of critical life-saving firearms red flag laws. I think if one thing was clear tonight, it's that there is a lot of misinformation and confusion about them. And to answer one of the questions previously, I believe that if a firearm restraining order is put out there, it actually is only relevant for a 6-month period of time. So it can be renewed, but that person can get their Foid card and their firearm back after a 6-month period of time. But anyway, as Chief Hornstein was saying, these laws are passed to help identify individuals at risk of harm to themselves or others and temporarily remove the firearms from their reach. And that's just a critical component in preventing mass shootings and school shootings, because we know that the perpetrator is so frequently known by law enforcement or teachers or social workers. So these laws are really underutilized in Illinois, and it's because people just don't know about them, but they are critical resources. So in the wake of Highland Park, I just would hope that our community would proceed thoughtfully and quickly and lead on these issues. On behalf of the 2,440 members, many of whom are here tonight, I would just ask the village to put some sensible village code in place that requires safe storage for all firearms, not just assault weapons, because that's not the majority of weapons that are in this town. Look at the village code and assess whether we can put in an assault weapons ban. And then we ask the police department and the schools to educate our residents about red flag laws. And we would love to see every single one of our schools communicating throughout the school year with families on an ongoing basis about safe gun storage. I think we believe that these are really reasonable asks that would help address a complex and unfortunately a growing problem. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren. I just wanted to make a quick comment before I give a quick speech here. Natalie just reminded me that we are giving out gun locks at the farmers market, and we're out of them constantly, which I think goes to show that a lot of our residents are in need of them, because I don't think they're locking up all of their guns. I just want to say that I want to begin this by saying I don't really know what the village council perceives their role to be, especially with gun sense and safety and legislation and what you can do. So I can only go from the communication that I get as a resident, and I've been a resident for 5 years, and I have 2 kids, one at Skokie, one at Washburn. I saw recently the mental health awareness of the 988 number that you sent out, and I didn't know about it. I thought it was great. Helps with suicide prevention and also mental health crisis line. I saw a blast from Fire Safety Reminders shared from the fire chief for help during spring cleaning. I saw a prescription drug give back program with no questions asked to get rid of drugs in the home. And I saw a reminder to put salt on my sidewalks. So it seems to be that the village is intending to help the residents take responsibility, be aware of resources that are out there, and helpful in giving suggestions to keep us all safe. But one of them caught my eye because I remember when it came out. It was a reminder to walk your bikes. It was following a very scary incident with a student who was biking on her way home from Washburn and was hit on Green Bay Road. She ended up with a badly broken leg, but she was going to be okay. But I was so impressed with the village. Posted signs on Elm and Chestnut and Lincoln reminding riders for compliance. And someone even produced a safety video and worked with District 36. And I remember this incident because I was worried about my own daughter biking home and crossing Green Bay. And I needed her to wear a helmet and to walk her bike downtown, and for drivers to be aware that when school gets out, there's a lot of kids biking. And there was a lot of community involvement. And I don't remember the village calling a meeting to hear both sides of the story, why bikers should walk their bikes or why they shouldn't walk their bikes. It was assumed that to keep our children safe, they need to walk their bikes. There was no questions, there's no pushback. because it was what the village does. Tries to remind us of resources. Even Winnetka provided its own resources with a video and putting up signs and sending reminders. I find this meeting interesting because my guess is the village is worried a little bit about the political argument with guns and that there are other sides to the argument. But here's the deal. I don't have prescription drugs in my home that I would need to give back, so I just keep on reading. I salt my sidewalks, so I just keep on reading. But I stopped and I reminded my daughter to walk her bike. They're just reminders to keep us all safe. And the one that stuck with me was specifically designed to keep my children safe biking home from school. I hope the village continues on its path. Guns are the #1 killer of children, and it is our community's job, all of us, to keep them safe. And I would like for everyone to just look around for a moment right now. We raised our hands that we were all Winnetka residents. And I want you to imagine just for a quick second that the Highland Park tragedy happened here. I think that this would be a very different meeting. The question I ask, is the village doing enough to keep our communities safe? If that answer is no, then let us keep going. You said at the beginning that you didn't know if anything was going to come out of this. I hope something does. Thank you for your notices, your reminders, and your resources. I appreciate all of your efforts, as I'm sure our neighbors do, to try to keep our community safe. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
To go a little lower here. Hi there. My name is Kitty Brantner. I am a 4.5-year resident of Winnetka. I also grew up here. And I brought my little family back here. On July 6th, I accidentally coordinated an organization with a bunch of other people called March 4th that brought supporters and survivors of Highland Park, survivors of Uvalde to DC, because we need a ban on assault weapons federally. Highland Park did have a ban on assault weapons. Winnetka should. The US needs to. And so, since that time, we've stood up an organization with over 20,000 supporters in 4 weeks. And what I'm learning is we are way more united on this issue than we're being told and that we thought. And this was an organization of people, including gun owners, from every political party, from every walk of life. And it's quite simply, as Stephanie mentioned, a public safety issue and a human issue, not a political one. Pulling up my notes, which are very brief, don't worry. So the assault weapon ban is not coming for everyone's guns. It's coming for the ones that were specifically designed to kill as many people as quickly as possible, as effectively as possible. That's it. Those are the ones that should not be in civilians' hands. America has a shooting epidemic, mass shooting epidemic, and we have to start doing something about it. There was a assault weapon ban passed in '94, which had a significant impact. And then it expired 10 years later. And since then, the epidemic of mass shootings in America has taken off. I'm really, really looking forward to being able to tell my 3 kids under 5 that when I was their age, these weapons were accessed by civilians, but not anymore. And I'm hopeful that Winnetka will take a leadership role in this stance. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie.
Hi, I'm Sarah Grease. I've lived in Winnetka for 14 years. I stand before you as a community member, a mother, and a teacher. I'm here to listen and think, and I also want to take a moment to speak specifically about what it feels like to be a teacher during our country's reality of mass shootings. In terms of school shootings, the day after one happens is the worst. I feel shaky as I leave my car and head into the building. I take a deep breath and greet my colleagues. It's a bit more businesslike because I'm trying to keep it together, and I sense they are too. I try to distract myself with emails and photocopies and other mundane tasks, but it hangs over me as I walk through the hallways and see my freshman students. My mind wanders to lockdown drills, how students huddle in a corner of the room in the dark with all their big eyes on me as I pretend to be in charge. But inside, it's unnerving. After each drill, I somehow manage to shift gears, teach a lesson, and keep it together until after school. This last spring, however, after the Uvalde shooting, I couldn't do that. On my way out of the English office, I saw the faces of the lost children on a colleague's open computer, and during my advisory, I started crying. The tears wouldn't stop either, and in 15 years of teaching, I thought about how that was the first time I cried in front of students. I didn't apologize. Uvalde happened, and then yet another shooting, this time close to home in Highland Park. My family and I spend a lot of time in Highland Park. We belong to the pool there, and if my kids can talk me into it after swimming, we get a treat on the main strip. On July 1st, my children and I sat outside in the sunshine eating gelato. 3 days later, at the exact location, a shooter climbed a roof and, like a sniper, killed and wounded innocent parade goers. That day, I read the news, sickened, heartbroken, and angry. That afternoon, I also read a thoughtful email from District 36 Superintendent Kelly Tess. With a heavy heart, she wrote to parents about the Highland Park tragedy, reminding us to look out for each other's socially emotional well-being. She also took a moment for an important message, to remind gun owners about safe gun storage. We need these reminders. Our job as teachers and parents and an entire community is to protect our kids and each other. Like I said at the beginning, I'm here today to tell you what it feels like to be a teacher right now. I'm also here as a parent and a community member to humbly ask, in this new norm of a world we didn't all know as kids, that we come together to support and educate each other, to create an open communication with our schools and our own village. My hope above all is that we can keep each other safe. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Hello, my name's Layla Danley, and I've been a Winnetka resident for 7.5 years. I'm also the Be Smart lead for the local Moms Demand Action Group, and Be Smart is a program that works solely on educating people about what secure gun storage is and why it's important. So that's the part that I'm going to talk about tonight. I am going to be the statistics person, so please try and stick with me, but I think that if you want to talk about globally why something's important and a real difference that the village could make, this is a big one. So I'm here tonight because I feel strongly that the village of Winnetka can and should be a leader in getting out a clear, consistent message about secure gun storage to all residents on a regular basis in conjunction with our schools and police department. And I know that discussing firearms and firearm safety makes a lot of people uncomfortable. So the fact that we're doing this tonight is amazing. But people think that it's awkward or political or it's not any of their business. But we've got to get past that mentality if we're going to reduce the number of kids specifically who are killed or injured by guns every year. Secure gun storage isn't political. It shouldn't be awkward. It's a public health and safety issue. And that's why we need you as village leadership to help educate our community members about secure gun storage. We should be able to discuss secure gun storage in the same way as both Lauren and Aaron discussed as bike safety, or one of my favorites, how to enjoy a fire-safe grilling season, which is a notice we get every year from the village and the fire department right around Memorial Day. So the issue of secure gun storage often gets a lot of attention when we have a mass shooting like the tragedy in Highland Park on the 4th of July, or if there's a mass school shooting like the one recently in Uvalde, Texas. But the reasons why we need to discuss this are because the cold, hard facts tell us that our inability to discuss it openly is killing our children. So that's why I'm going to take a few minutes to give you some of the facts. The US is the only country that has more civilian-owned firearms than it does people. In fact, firearms recently became the leading cause of death for children in the United States, surpassing motor vehicle deaths and those caused by other injuries. The United States is alone among peer nations in the number of child firearm deaths. In no other similarly large or wealthy country are firearm deaths in the top 4 causes of mortality, let alone the #1 cause of death among children. Over 13 million households have both children under 18 and guns. We also know that an estimated 4.6 million children live in a home with at least one loaded, unlocked firearm. A 2018 Johns Hopkins study revealed that an estimated 54% of gun owners don't lock their guns securely. Why is this important? Well, according to a study by the American Academy of Pediatrics, 39% of parents with guns in the household said their children don't know where their guns are. 75% of the children who were asked said they do know where their guns are, and that 36% of that 75 said that they had recently handled the gun without their parents' knowledge. Do you know what age group is at the highest risk of self-inflicted shootings? 2 to 4-year-olds. As Lauren mentioned, 1 in every 5 high schoolers contemplated suicide in the last year. Most people who attempt suicide don't die. Only 2% of young people who attempt suicide through an overdose will die, but 90% of young people who use a gun in a suicide attempt will. Additionally, each year, an estimated 200,000 to 500,000 guns are stolen, and many are funneled into the underground market where firearms that were once legally owned can be transferred to people with dangerous history. So let's talk for a minute about school shootings, because that's always sort of on everybody's mind. In 80% of school shootings, the young person who carried out the attack got their guns from either their own home or the home of a friend or relative. Imagine what things would look like today if they weren't able to access these firearms. Does education about secure gun storage work? It does. One study found that households that locked both firearms and ammunitions were associated with an 85% lower risk of unintentional firearm injuries among children and teens specifically. Another estimated that half of households with children that have at least 1 unlocked guns that switch to locking their guns, we would see a 1/3 drop in suicide. These statistics are why we're asking people to set aside politics and focus on safety. And we need your help in getting out the message about what secure gun storage is and why it's important. We all want kids to grow up happy and healthy. We all want safe communities. We're all able to make responsible decisions about how to protect our homes and families, including whether or not to own a gun. To go back to the idea that this is a political issue, Chief Orenstein mentioned that they're talking about partnering with Project Child Safe. It's one of the nation's largest secure gun safety education programs. It's run by the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is a trade association for the firearm industry. So it's supported by gun manufacturers and sellers alike. That's how important this issue is. Finally, I just want to say that because of the ordinance that was discussed earlier, MC, I believe it's MC-4-2013, obviously doesn't cover all types of firearms, but it does require safe gun storage and provides the village with a way to enter the conversation about secure gun storage that is in line with existing village ordinances. So if you're looking for something today that will make a real difference, as President Rintz asked, coming out with a consistent message from village, taking a leadership position is the way to go. Education is a crucial step in this, and this is where we need your leadership. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the second row. We'll start with you. Next. Come on up.
Hi, my name's Joan Esposito. Clearly, I have an outdoor voice. I've lived in Winnetka for 17 years, and I understand, listening to our legal representation, how the deck is stacked against any village that tries to legislate something that our own Supreme Court doesn't seem to support. But sometimes I think you have to take a stand, even if you know eventually it could be a losing stand, because it sends a message. And I think that whether or not Winnetka passes an assault ban weapon that stands the test legally, I think it sends a message, and it's an important message. Also, as we've heard, and I'm sure you've heard, Governor Pritzker is talking about a special session this September. It was originally going to be called just to deal with reproductive rights, but he's thinking about expanding it to gun legislation. I really hope that you, as our representatives, people who wield power in our little village, are reaching out to the state senators and the state representatives, many of whom overlap our area in various pieces, and let them know what your stand is. Let them know that you would be behind them if they stick their neck out and support this idea of an assault weapons ban for the state of Illinois. And one more thing when it comes to talking with our legislators, Chief, I would really love it. You said that you don't know. If you look to see who has a FOIA card, you can find out, but you don't know how many guns they have or what guns they have. If you have ideas that will make communities safer, again, please, I'm begging you, talk to our state reps, talk to our state senators, and say to Laura Fine, say to Robin Gable, say to Jonathan Carroll, this is what would really help me if you could make sure this gets in the bill, or at least maybe next session, this is something that we talk about, because you're the one who we count on to keep us safe, and you know what would help you. So, thank you.
We'll move over to this side then. No. Okay, then we'll, like a typewriter. We'll reset next row.
What?
Boy, am I dating myself now. Like a typewriter, where the hell did that come from? So animal. I'm sorry.
I was just telling Joan that I taught her daughter. I'm trying to remember what year it was. It's probably 10 years ago. My name is Meg Zeal. I'm a Winnetka resident. I'm also a teacher at Washburn. I've been there 14 years now. And I actually grew up in Winnetka. So I've actually been a Winnetka resident, I think, about 30 years. I'm 38, so that's pretty impressive. I was thinking about what exactly I want to say, and I keep coming back to President Rintz. You started this meeting by saying you don't want to get our hopes up, and you're not sure what can be done. But I want to challenge you. We are the Lighthouse District. We're Winnetka. We don't play by the rules. We make the rules. We redefine the rules. We tell our kids that anything is possible, and we encourage that. Why would we box ourselves into what exists already? We all know there's a problem. Yes, there's mass shootings. There's also self-harm. And a lot of times, self-harm is not easily recognizable until it's too late. And once again, we've seen that at Washburn and with the creation of Erica's Lighthouse. So I'm here to voice my support. I think everyone has such good ideas here. You guys, hearing you talk, you're so smart. You have great ideas too. It's our job to figure out what we can possibly do. It's not our job to be discouraged. So I'm feeling hopeful because I've heard a lot of great suggestions, and I'm just wondering how we're going to figure out the timetable for these things. But I hope you are too. I hope we're going to redefine what is possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
A little bit taller. My name's Jenna Dougherty. I have been a Winnetka resident for about 7 years now. Moved from the city because this is a wonderful community and very safe for my family. I also happen to work at a healthcare company, locally a large healthcare company. And in 2017, I became responsible for all of our global health programs. And we wanted to make a shift and focus on cardiovascular and diabetes, cardiovascular diseases and diabetes, non-communicable diseases. And one of the shifts that I wanted to make strategically as I looked across the world was to look a little bit closer to home and in our communities. And so I started looking across the United States, including here in Chicagoland in our backyard, and looked at a tool called a community health needs assessment, which is a requirement now with the ACA for not-for-profit hospitals. And they do those needs assessments with a variety of stakeholders. They interview parents, different nonprofit organizations, community leaders like yourselves. And the result of that analysis was really staggering to me. I came in because I know that non-communicable diseases are such a prevalent issue. And what I found in each one of those needs assessments was that gun violence was the #1 health issue that was listed over and over and over again, particularly when looking at things affecting children. And I started to think about other public health crises in our nation's history. And one of the things that I think we can all be proud of as Americans is that we, invented CPR. Not only did we invent CPR, but we were the catalyst for spreading that far and wide. We created hotlines. You could call a telephone number, right, and get information about cardiovascular disease. We created posters, we created fundraising events, we created a Heart Health Month. We created trainings, easily accessible trainings. We did all of these things because there was a clear, issue around cardiovascular disease. And here we are faced with staggering statistics that many people have shared over and over and over again, and I experienced in my professional life. We are presented with it, and I think my plea to you is to take that same approach that we did with CPR. Let's plaster the streets. Let's create hotlines. Let's create trainings. Let's provide an innumerable amount of resources to our community so that we can make a meaningful change. And hopefully that in our lifetime, the #1 cause of death for children will not be guns. And it can be something a little bit more squarely in the health realm. So again, I thank you for the conversation, the dialogue, and for listening tonight. And again, I'm really proud to be a member of this community, and I hope that we can lead here. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, anybody else in that row there? I'm losing my perspective here, so we'll come back over here. Oh, come on up. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Hi, I didn't think I was going to speak today, but I am. My name's Joanna Ramo. I just graduated from the University of Illinois. I went to New Trier High School, and I'm here with my family. But I helped lead the student walkout at New Trier 4 years ago after the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas mass shooting. We had a great turnout. I feel like for the first time, faculty and students were talking to each other, and there was a dialogue around that, and we were seeing people speak out, and a lot of my friends and I felt like empowered to make a change with this. It's disappointing and sad to me that 4 years later, not much has changed. If anything, things have gotten worse, and we had to deal with this in our own community in Highland Park. So I just thought that was kind of powerful, and I'm hoping that there are real things we can do as a community, and I'm hoping we can be leaders. I think there was some amazing ideas thrown out tonight, and they're shown to work. So I think safe storage is a really, really, really important start. And I also think that, wait, I had some notes. I think more communication with the school, students, and parents about like what red flag laws are, and just communication in general. I think that a lot of parents and students in this community would be on board with this stuff. They just don't know about it, and so knowing is really important. And as like a student, I didn't feel like I was informed. I also think that it's time to like ride this momentum. It was unfortunate that an event had to happen so near to home that people are starting to wake up and see that this is a health crisis, but I'm hoping that there can be a positive impact of that, in the sense that we can make a change and keep riding this momentum, and not just be talking about it now, but continue the conversation moving forward. That's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I wrote this down and I didn't say it, and I just wanted to really quickly. I'm really, really sorry. The referendum that is going to be up for a vote, and I'm still really learning about what that means, but it will include significant changes and improvements in our schools, namely regarding safety and regarding air conditioning, so that we don't have to keep windows and doors open, and secure vestibules, et cetera. So please, to anyone that is a Winnetka resident, that's a really, really important thing to vote for.
Okay, we'll work back to because I don't see anybody back there, right? Okay, we'll come to the next row back here. Anybody like to speak? And then we'll hit the sides of the rooms next.
My name is Jean
You
Bishop.
don't get another bite
Oh,
of
I'm
the
sorry.
apple. I'm sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. My name is Jean Bishop. I was born in Winnetka. I moved back here when I had children of my own. Both my two sons have grown up here, have gone to Winnetka Public Schools all the way through. And what brings me here is that in 1990, 2 blocks from here, you can almost see it from the window, 722 Oak Street, my younger sister Nancy, and her, at age 25, her husband Richard, 29, and their unborn baby were shot to death in their home. And a safe storage law or a red flag law would have saved them, because the killer is a teenager who lived also in Winnetka, a few blocks from here, and got that gun out of an unlocked drawer after he threatened to break into the law office where he found it. And a red flag law would have saved him, because he had tried to fake a Foid card at the age of 16 in order to buy a gun instead of steal one. So this issue matters deeply to me. And the last time I was in this room was in 2008, when I had to watch my heartbroken mother, Joyce Bishop, who's not a political person, stand before the then council and beg them not to abandon the laws that protected us against gun violence, and had to watch the council unanimously vote to do just that. And she passed away this past year. And this is the first 4th of July I've had without her, and our tradition every year was to go together to our parade. And because I missed her so much, I decided, instead of going to the parade with friends and family, that I would go and visit my mom's burial place at Kenilworth Union Church. And I rode my bike over there, and I rode my bike back right around the time that the parade here would have been ending. And normally you see neighbors and friends, and they're calling to each other, and people are having parties in their front yards, and people are getting ready to go to the fireworks that night. It's a place I love to see our chief, who's a deeply respected and long-term friend of mine, and my friends and neighbors. And instead, when I came riding on my bike, I didn't have a radio. I didn't know what had happened at the Highland Park shooting. And so I saw the streets empty. I saw a few grim-faced parents clutching the hands of their children and walking heads down to their home. And then I heard the news. And you remember the rest of the day, and I hope you never forget it, what it was like to be locked in our houses, to have the streets empty, to have the fireworks canceled on our 4th of July because of the horror that happened on our doorstep. I am leaving this meeting tonight so much more hopeful than I was when I left that meeting in 2008 in this room, because I know some of you, and I respect all of you, and I believe in you, and I know that you can't do nothing in response to all this. You have to do something, and I believe you will. And I'm going to thank you now in advance for that. Thank you so much.
Patrick? Oh, I guess not.
Sorry, is that good? So I'm Jackie Ramo. We live in Winnetka. We've been here for 17 years. Joanna's my kid. I didn't plan what I wanted to say, but I will tell you. So 10 years ago, Sandy Hook was what got me involved in worrying about gun violence prevention. I joined Moms Demand Action then because my younger daughter was 6 years old, and all the kids in Sandy Hook were 6 years old. And so it just gutted me. And so for the last 10 years, I've been working on this. And what I want to tell you, I think everybody else has covered a lot of stuff, right? So I feel like a different angle I can bring to this is that over the 10 years that I've been doing this now, I've seen a sea change in public attitude towards this crisis. When I first got involved, you couldn't even talk about gun violence. You couldn't, politicians would, it was just, you wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. And over the last 10 years, I've seen more and more people care about this issue. More and more people are willing to stick out their necks. Politicians now have support from the community. All kinds of polls have shown that the vast, vast, vast majority of Americans are on the side of making things safer. We all know what to do. This is not rocket science. Everybody knows what needs to be done. We're the only country that this kind of thing happens in. So I guess I want to say, here we are. We've got Moms Demand Action right here in our neighborhood. We've got thousands of us. We're ready to work. We're ready to support you. If you're willing to put out your, stick out your neck, we're going to be there with you. We have a lot of smart people with us. We know what we're talking about. We've been working on this a long time. We can't do nothing. We have to do a lot. A lot of the things are easy. Safe storage, please, come on. We can all do that. That's the easiest thing in the world. There's no reason not to do it. And I would like to not only, have a lot of communication, that's really important, but we need to have requirements for safe storage because there are people that will not, they don't care. They don't read the newsletter, right? So it has to be a requirement and there have to be serious consequences if the gun has not been stored safely and it's used in a crime or a child takes it and hurts themselves, right? There have to be consequences. Same thing with our, firearm restraining order. Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's get people to know. I mean, these are easy things that we can do immediately, and then we can also tackle the really hard things, because honestly, they're not that hard. Most people agree. We can have an assault weapons ban in this country. Most people agree. So that's just what I wanted to say. That I feel like we can support you. We'll have your backs, and we can also work with you and help you know what we can do. We have lots of ideas.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving across this way. Anybody in?
There's a hand
Bishop? No?
Left side hand up.
Hold on, I'm working my way through the middle first here. How about last row? No? Okay, now we'll start on this side and work our way down. Staff is not allowed to speak this evening, so skip the first two. Anybody on this side want to come on up and share your thoughts? Come on up.
Hi, so I'm Lila Kelber. I'm a student at New Trier, and I've watched as students at so many different schools have been absolutely traumatized by mass shootings. I've heard so many people say that you never believe it's going to be your school or your town until it happens, and I've waited for it to happen to me. So I was in the Winnetka 4th of July parade, and after, when I checked my phone, I saw a text from my family asking if I was safe. because, as I was about to find out, a massacre had just happened in Highland Park at their 4th of July parade. And unfortunately, I could believe it, because for years I'd been warned by others, we've all been warned by others, that if we sit and do nothing, the next victim will be your family, your friend, or you. And instead of action, we've given victims thoughts and moments of silence. For example, days after the Uvalde massacre, the annual NRA convention did meet. They briefly offered thoughts and prayers, yet they still refuse to recognize that the insanely easy access to guns are the reason that children are murdered in schools, and the reason that I don't feel safe at school in Winnetka. I don't want metal detectors or armed teachers or to spend loads of money doing other safety features in the school. I want the actual murder weapon, military assault weapons, to not be in the hands of citizens. I want something to be done. But for my work in the gun prevention world, I know that mass shootings are 1% of gun violence. It's horrible to know that so many people die daily from guns, maybe not in Winnetka, but in Chicago, where many of us probably say we live when we're out of town or just somewhere outside of Illinois. And these daily shootings don't even make the news. But there are ways we can help in Winnetka. So first of all, I know we've talked about safe storage a lot. I think that needs to be clearly communicated. I don't know if we need to put up posters or what, but just so everyone realizes the need to have a safe. Next, we can better educate about red flag laws, as we were talking about. Many shooters display these warning signs before hurting anyone, and I don't think people in Winnetka know that there's a way that you can have this red flag laws. Especially even my friend a few days ago saw something on Snapchat that scared us. It was just a bunch of guns, and we didn't really know exactly who to contact, and nothing's been done because of that. We just don't know. Lastly, I think just larger donations to organizations like Everytown are great, but I also think we should talk about and help fund smaller organizations that help very locally in Chicago, because the gun violence issue in Chicago is a totally different thing than laws. It needs to be help from the start and help just end the cycle of violence. So anyways, I'm sick of having to give these speeches. I shouldn't have to. This shouldn't be an issue. And I want Winnetka to take direct action at ending gun violence, which means addressing that guns are the problem. And I want to feel safe at school, and I want shootings to actually be a shock again.
Thank you. Anybody else on this side of the room, on the south side of the room? Nope? How about over here? Either of you two, come on up.
Hi, my name's Caroline Betzel. I've lived here for 7.5 years. Some of you I know. Hello. I have 5 children, 2 of whom are in school here, one of whom is a teacher at Virginia Tech. I don't need to explain to you why that's an issue and why guns are front of mind for her in the classroom. I'm a gun owner. I bought my guns from the UK. To have a gun in the UK, I had to be interviewed by the police. They came to my house. They talked to my husband and I. They looked at our health records to see if we were mentally stable, if we had any history of alcoholism or gambling, any red flags that they would, they could turn to and say, absolutely not, you cannot have a gun. And that's okay. It was okay that the police came to my house. It was okay that they asked us all these awkward questions about our marriage, about our health. They went to our, through our health records. They went through our criminal records, of which we have none, thankfully, which is why I still have a gun. All of which is okay by me. What scares me in this country is that none of that happens. So you can go into a shop and just buy a gun. And that's what I think is not okay here. I think that we should dig deeper into people's character. We should dig deeper into their history of violence, how safe their homes are, and how they store their guns. And to not do so is just totally unacceptable to me. I want to feel safe again, and I really don't feel safe in a community where we're not doing that kind of thing. So I think we can keep talking about this, or we can actually start to think about how we act now. stop this violence happening, because on the trajectory we're on at the moment, things are only going to get so much worse for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody in the room who hasn't spoken this evening who wishes to? Come on up.
My name is Therese Beach. I have lived in this town for 37 years. I've raised my children in this town. One of my own children, luckily, was not hit by a bullet, but she was impacted by a shooting in Washington, D.C. when it came through her bedroom window. So I know how frightened people are here for gunfire. And I just want to say the peacefulness that we've shown here, the civility that we've shown here, is our strength. And I really know that, you can see I'm an old lady, so I'm not on social media posting this and posting that. But I really want people to remember, you're going to get more in an argument with civility. Don't go on in the name of peace and threaten somebody who's also working for the name of peace, because they're not working. You know, I think we have to remember, work together for peace. Don't be threatening people in a crazy rant. Don't be saying things that don't get your objective forward. Try to remember that this is a serious issue. It needs to be treated seriously. This is something we all need to remember. Civility matters when you're trying to get things done. And I would like to see everybody treat their neighbors and friends with kindness. There are a lot of different opinions, but those people who don't want to ban assault weapons, to my mind, are crazy, but they're also my friends. And so try to remember that we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay. I am going to take that home tonight. Work together for peace. Thank you very much. That was an awesome way to end this meeting. I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight and sharing with us. I feel, Layla, you might feel good about this, I feel a little smarter than when I walked in the room this evening, and I think that's what we were all hoping for, was to at least get some facts, figures, and some ideas. At some point in the near future, Village Council will convene on this and enter into discussions. Again, trying to sort through some of this stuff and decide. We're done with public comment now, Mr. Gelbman. Thank you. That's good. So thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate the input, and we look forward to rolling up our sleeves. And most importantly, I want to thank my colleagues, because, look, the reason why we take this job is because we love to talk to each other, and we love to debate, and sometimes we don't agree, and sometimes we do. But you know, that activity is what really kind of brings us out every Tuesday night. And for us to sit silent for the better part of 2 hours is really an amazing feat on their part as well. So thank you all for tolerating my concept here and listening in, and we look forward to returning to the conversation very soon. So with that said, I'd just like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we stand adjourned, folks. Thank you very much.